You saw them on television, heard them on records and radio throughout the nation for years. We'd like for you friends to get together here today to make them real welcome. Here they are in person, Carter and Ralph, the Stanley brothers. All right, say hi.
Got a number for my name, and the warden said when you lock the door, you gamble your last game. Gamble my last game, gamble my last game.
A Life of Sorrow, The Life and Times of Carter Stanley, is a one-man play about a bluegrass legend. Carter Stanley was a gifted songwriter and an expressive singer who traveled for 20 years as a member of the Stanley Brothers, one of the premier groups from the early days of bluegrass. He met an early demise in 1966 after years of alcohol abuse, and today is largely forgotten. A Life of Sorrow affords today's audiences a chance to hear his story as told by him. I was just a little feller, 10 or 11 years old, when I saw my first hillbilly music show. Well, they had it right down to the high school there in the auditorium. Oh, big, grand old Opry show. Why, they had the Delmore Brothers, Clayton McMitchin and the Georgia Wildcats. And when the curtains went up and the light shone down on those entertainers, oh, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I knew right then what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, making music. I wanted to be an entertainer. Music was life for Carter Stanley. Along with his brother Ralph, they formed the second professional band to ever perform bluegrass music. They took their cues from Bill Monroe, the acknowledged father of bluegrass, who defined the genre in the middle 1940s. It wasn't long afterwards that Carter was helping to define the foundation to the music with his songwriting and musicianship. Now, we'd like to call up one of the bluegrass boys to help me do a little number here. One of the finest fellas to ever stand beside of me on the stage and hold a guitar, and one of the fellas that has one of the finest natural lead voices that I've ever heard in my life. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Carter Stanley. Now, Carter, you come on up here and help me do this little number that we recorded for Decca Records the other day called the Sugar-Coated Love. Now, that's going to be coming out on the Decca label one of these days, and we want you folks to be on the lookout for it. Bill Monroe called my name on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Oh, you couldn't ask for a better friend than Bill Monroe. The seeds for A Life of Sorrow were sown in the late 1960s, when I saw a televised performance of Hal Holbrook performing Mark Twain. Some 40 years later, I was reminded of Holbrook's performance and thought, why not Carter Stanley? After several semesters of acting classes at a local community college, and involvement in over 60 community theater projects as an actor, producer, and stage manager, A Life of Sorrow is now a reality. I have an independent streak about me. I like to kick back and rebel every now and again. Well, I remember one time we was coming back from a show date somewheres. Oh, it was dark, late at night. There was a storm a-coming. Pretty bad one, too. Lots of thunder and lightning. The old boy who was driving the car for us that night, it had him shook up pretty bad. It didn't bother me any. I just rolled down the car window, stuck my fist up in the air and hollered, "You think you can get me? Come on!" There ain't nobody or no thing gets the better of Carter Stanley. My own involvement with Carter and Ralph Stanley began in 1973, when I discovered their music in a collection of record albums that were won at a police auction. Since that time, I've become the go-to person for all things Stanley, and have produced a number of reissues of their recordings, written liner notes for their albums and CDs, and recently completed the definitive history of their prolific and multifaceted recording career. Well, me and Ralph was out on the streets of Bristol one day, and we run into Flat. Oh, we exchanged how-do-you-do's with him and one thing and another, and, well, it wasn't too long before he took us to task about some of the songs we liked to sing. A lot of the ones we'd heard by Bill Monroe on the Grand Ole Opry. Oh, Lester told us that since he was working with Bill Monroe at the time a lot of these songs was made popular, if anybody had a right to do them, it was him and not us. Well, then he just flat out told us, says, don't sing them songs. Well, one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, he's bad-mouthing Ralph. Now, he can talk about me all he wants, but when he goes to bad-mouthing my little brother, I just had to pop him. A Life of Sorrow is a play with music, as opposed to being a musical. Snippets of Carter's songs are performed to highlight portions of his life that he is talking about. Throughout the show, he recalls childhood days on the family farm, his admiration for old-time musicians that he listened to and liked, stories of life on the road, his songwriting, his jealousies and insecurities, his friendships, and admiration for the music of Bill Monroe. Well, we was kindly raised up on hillbilly music. And to me, that's not a dirty word. Well, we listen to people like the Carter family, Mainer's Mountaineers, the Monroe brothers. Well, after Bill and Charlie Monroe kindly split up and went their own separate ways, why then there was Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. Well, we used to see advertisements for him in the local newspaper when he would bring his program around to our part of the country. Oh, they called him the greatest hillbilly entertainer of them all. And he was, too. And after we got to hearing the kind of music Bill was a-making with his group, well, we knew right then that was the sound for us. Mandolins and fiddles, guitars and banjos, them's the kind of instruments Bill used to make his music, and them's the same kind of instruments we use to make our music. But you know, it's not just the instruments, it's what you do with them. It's the rhythm and the drive and the power and the punch. That's what makes this kind of music.